Ethan lived alone in a run-down apartment above his garage on the outskirts of Houston, where the smell of engine oil and burnt rubber lingered in the air day and night. His life revolved around fixing broken cars, worn-out engines, and machines others had thrown away. He had no fancy tools, no employees, and no flashy advertisements, just a reputation built slowly through honest work and a mind sharper than anyone expected from a man covered in grease. People often underestimated him, but Ethan didn't care. He believed machines had personalities, and if he listened closely, he could understand what they needed. His shop was small, but it was the only place where he felt alive. One stormy morning, thunder crackled across the skies, shaking the loose metal sheets of the old workshop roof. Ethan was tightening bolts on a rusty pickup truck when he heard an unfamiliar sound, a smooth engine hum, nothing like the broken vehicles he usually serviced. He wiped his hands on a towel and stepped outside. A sleek black limousine rolled to a silent stop, its glossy surface reflecting the wet pavement. Ethan froze. Cars like that didn't come here. People who owned them didn't even look in this direction. Something was different today. The back door opened, and out stepped a woman dressed in an expensive coat, her presence almost commanding the air. Around her, Ethan recognized her instantly. Olivia Carter, the billionaire CEO of Carter Innovations, a name that appeared everywhere, from airports to tech billboards. Beside her was a girl in a wheelchair, covered in a blanket, her legs motionless. Her bright blue eyes scanned the garage with curiosity and sadness mixed together. Ethan felt a strange pull toward her gaze, as if she had more to say than her silence admitted. Olivia looked uncomfortable, as though stepping into a mechanic's grimy world was the last thing she ever expected to do. Yet, desperation was visible in her stiff movements and trembling voice. She explained that her daughter, Emily, had been in a terrible accident 2 years ago. Every doctor, every rehabilitation expert, every physical therapist they tried had failed to help her walk again. The most advanced medical technologies hadn't made a difference. Emily's wheelchair, custom-made, expensive, and supposedly state-of-the-art, was constantly malfunctioning. No one could fix it, not even the engineers who built it. But someone had told her about Ethan. Ethan listened quietly, trying to understand what a billionaire wanted from a mechanic like him. He inspected the chair, running his fingers along its joints, wheels, and control systems. It didn't take long for him to notice things others had ignored: tiny misalignments, sensors positioned wrongly, weakened support structures. He felt a spark ignite inside him. This wasn't just a repair job, it was a challenge, a puzzle waiting for the right person to solve it. Emily watched him intently, her eyes following every move, as though she hoped he might say something that could change her world. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Helping Emily felt personal in a way nothing else ever had. He remembered his own past, memories he had buried deep, where another wheelchair had been involved. His younger sister's. She had been diagnosed with a rare muscle disorder, and Ethan had spent years trying to invent something that could help her move freely again. But he had been too late. She passed away before he could finish anything meaningful. Her loss was the wound Ethan never allowed to heal. Looking at Emily felt like confronting a ghost he thought he'd outrun. Olivia didn't know his history. She only saw a poor mechanic with calloused hands and oil-stained clothes. She didn't expect him to understand the world of billion-dollar medical research. But Ethan didn't need labs or money. His understanding came from heartbreak, obsession, and the refusal to accept limits. He knelt beside Emily and spoke to her gently, asking how the chair behaved, what bothered her the most, and when the malfunctions happened. Emily's voice was soft, but every word carried pain. She didn't complain for sympathy. She stated facts, as if she had learned to expect disappointment. The storm outside grew louder, winds rattling the windows, yet inside the garage, a strange stillness formed around them. Ethan tested the chair, lifting it, rotating parts and opening panels with an old screwdriver that had seen better days. Olivia watched him silently, surprised at how comfortable her daughter seemed, near a man whose social status was worlds away from theirs. Something about Ethan's focus made Emily relax, as if she trusted him instantly. Olivia had hired experts with degrees, awards, and advanced labs, yet none of them had listened like this mechanic did. After several minutes, Ethan stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead. He said he could fix it. No hesitation, no bargaining, no arrogance. Olivia blinked in disbelief. So many had promised and failed. Yet here was a mechanic from a forgotten street in Houston confidently saying yes. Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile, something Olivia hadn't seen in months. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the spark of it. Olivia asked how long it would take and what he would charge. Ethan didn't answer right away. Money wasn't his concern. What he wanted was something else entirely, another chance, one he never got with his sister. Olivia agreed to leave the chair with him. As the limousine drove away, Ethan stood alone in the rain-soaked silence, staring at the wheelchair as though it were alive. He felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just a machine, it was Emily's world, her mobility, her freedom, her lost dreams. He couldn't let this be another failure. He rolled the chair inside, closed the garage door, and took a deep breath. Something had begun, something neither he nor Olivia understood, but Emily felt it. Her instincts told her that the man who lived among broken machines might be the one person capable of piecing her life together again. Ethan worked on the chair long after midnight, surrounded by scattered bolts, wires, and tools that barely held themselves together. He examined each part as if it were a living extension of Emily's body, understanding that any mistake he made would affect her directly. Unlike other mechanics who saw machines as things, Ethan treated them like puzzles that revealed their secrets only when approached with patience. He took measurements, redrew designs, and ran tests on circuits he'd never seen before. The chair was more advanced than anything he had ever touched. Yet, something about it felt incomplete, almost like its creators stopped caring halfway through. Ethan couldn't understand how such an expensive device could be built with so little heart. As the night deepened, memories of his sister returned without permission. He remembered her excitement the day he promised he would build her something that could help her walk again. He remembered how she smiled at him even when she was too weak to stand, believing in dreams he could not complete. Those memories burned inside him like a brand, pushing him forward. Emily wasn't his sister, but the pain, the waiting, the frustration. He knew it all too well. For the first time in years, he felt as if he had the chance to rewrite a chapter of his life that had ended in regret. He couldn't fail again, not now. He began replacing damaged joints with custom parts he made by hand, shaping metal pieces until they matched Emily's exact weight, height, and movement. Requirements: he didn't have fancy machines, he used what he had, an old welding torch, a grinder, and his bare hands. Every improvement he made changed something fundamental about the chair. The more he worked, the more he realized that the problem wasn't Emily's inability to walk. It was the technology, designed for her, that failed to understand her needs. The chair didn't need to carry her, it needed to respond to her. And that idea became the foundation of his approach. The next morning, Olivia returned to check on the progress. She found Ethan asleep on the floor, tools spread around him. The wheelchair half disassembled like an open heart undergoing surgery. She didn't wake him. Instead, she watched how he had placed cushions on the floor to kneel more comfortably and notes scribbled everywhere. Pressure angles, weight distribution, motor responses, and emotional considerations. Olivia was stunned. No engineer at Carter Innovations had ever written the phrase user anxiety impact or comfort confidence level in their plans. Ethan wasn't just fixing a machine. He was designing a future based on empathy. When Ethan finally woke up, Olivia asked why he hadn't accepted her offer to hire assistants or use her lab. She could give him anything he needed: tools, specialists, technology. Ethan shook his head. He explained that people who worked for corporations built machines for numbers, patents, and money. But he worked for people, for their struggles, their hopes, their fears. In a corporate lab, Emily would just be a case. Here, she was a life he was responsible for. Olivia didn't know how to react. She had spent years surrounded by board members and investors who demanded results, profits, and performance. Ethan's logic sounded almost foolish, yet she couldn't argue with it. A week passed, and Emily came along this time. Ethan wanted her to be part of the process. He asked her to describe how she felt when she tried to move, what scared her, what made her hesitate. Emily spoke slowly, telling him about the sudden jerks in the previous chair, how falling felt like reliving her accident, and how her legs felt disconnected from her mind. Ethan listened to every detail without interrupting. Olivia watched, astonished. No doctor had asked those questions. They talked in medical terms, not human ones. They focused on her condition, not her experience. Here, for the first time, someone asked how Emily felt. Ethan rebuilt the balance sensors using a technique he invented on the spot: adaptive motion feedback. It allowed the chair to stabilize automatically when Emily leaned forward, giving her confidence to put weight on her legs. The motors engaged not when she pressed a button, but when her muscles hinted at movement. He wasn't repairing her chair anymore. He was turning it into something the world had never seen. Olivia realized that Ethan didn't need a corporation behind him. The corporation needed him. She wondered what would happen if the world discovered what this mechanic had. Created in a garage no investor cared to step into. Emily tried the upgraded chair for the first time that evening. Her hands trembled as Ethan held the sides to support her. Slowly, she pushed her foot forward, expecting the familiar jerk of instability, but it didn't come. The chair adjusted smoothly, shifting balance like a gentle guide rather than a cage. Emily gasped. She placed her second foot down, then leaned forward. The chair responded instantly, encouraging her movement instead of threatening it. Ethan didn't cheer or clap. He watched, quietly, letting Emily absorb what was happening. Olivia covered her mouth, tears gathering in her eyes. She wasn't prepared for this. Hope was dangerous. It made pain sharper when it broke. Emily took 3 careful steps before stopping. Her chest rose and fell like she had climbed a hill. Each step wasn't perfect, but they were hers, not the machine's. Olivia couldn't hold back anymore. She cried softly at first, then uncontrollably. Ethan stepped back, uncomfortable with praise but deeply satisfied. Emily looked up at him and smiled, something pure and bright, different from the faint smiles she had forced before. This one was real. It was the smile of someone who had just touched the impossible. That night, Ethan stayed awake again, refining every detail. He wasn't satisfied. With 3 steps, he wanted Emily to take 30, then 100, then as many as she wished. He wasn't finished, not until she needed the chair only for support, not survival. Olivia didn't ask about deadlines, or reports, or patents. For the first time, she didn't act like a CEO. She acted like a mother watching a miracle grow. Emily slept peacefully for the first time in years, dreaming of a world where she wasn't defined by what she couldn't do. Ethan looked at the chair, knowing what he was creating was more than technology. It was redemption, for him, for Emily, and for anyone who had ever been told they were broken beyond repair. He didn't know what the world would say when they found out, but he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a miracle taking shape in a forgotten garage at the edge of Houston. The sun had just begun to rise over Houston when Ethan unlocked his garage door. The soft light touched the steel frames and metal scraps that had become witnesses to his sleepless nights. He felt something different that morning, a quiet certainty that he had crossed a line between mechanic and miracle worker. The day before, Emily had taken 5 steps without collapsing. 5 steps that changed everything. Olivia had recorded them with trembling hands, unable to breathe as she watched her daughter walk for the first time in years. The video, without Ethan's knowledge, had already begun to spread across social media like wildfire. By noon, cars lined the street outside his tiny shop. Reporters, neighbors, and strangers came to see the man who had given a billionaire's daughter a miracle. Ethan didn't want attention, he wanted time. Cameras flashed, people shouted questions, and Olivia's security team struggled to manage the crowd. Olivia herself arrived soon after, her expression torn between pride and guilt. She knew this fame was unwanted, but it was too late to stop. Ethan's quiet act of compassion had turned into a national story overnight. They called him the mechanic who defied medicine. Ethan didn't see it that way. He hadn't defied anything. He had just listened when others didn't. Emily sat in her chair, shyly waving at the people outside. She didn't like the noise, but she loved seeing her mother smile again. Ethan walked over, kneeling beside her like he always did. He asked her how she felt, and she said something that silenced everyone nearby. "I feel like my legs belong to me again." It was simple, but powerful. Olivia broke down in tears right there, hugging her daughter tightly. For years, she had blamed herself for the accident, for trusting doctors who spoke in probabilities instead of possibilities. Watching her daughter stand, even for a few seconds, erased years of guilt she had, carried like a chain around her heart. Later that day, Olivia offered Ethan a partnership, a multi-million-dollar contract to join Carter Innovations and develop his design on a global scale. She promised him everything he could ever want: a research lab, assistance, patents in his name, fame, and fortune. Ethan listened, silently, his hands resting on the very chair that had started it all. He thanked her for the offer, but refused. Olivia couldn't understand. He explained gently that what he built for Emily wasn't meant to be owned, patented, or sold. It was meant to be shared with people who couldn't afford the technology corporations, priced beyond reach. He didn't want his invention turned into another product that only the rich could access. Olivia was stunned by his simplicity. She wasn't used to hearing no. People begged for her approval, not the other way around. But Ethan's refusal wasn't arrogance, it was principle. He told her he would rather keep his designs open for anyone willing to build them. If a child in a small town or a soldier recovering from injury could benefit, then that was his reward. Olivia didn't argue further. She saw something in him that made her feel small, not because of pride, but because she realized how far she had drifted from genuine purpose in her corporate world. Ethan's world was made of rust and sweat, but it was pure. Days turned into weeks. Emily's progress was astonishing. Every morning she practiced walking, first with the chair, then with less assistance. Ethan adjusted the chair daily, fine-tuning it based on her feedback. The chair seemed to evolve alongside her, less a machine, more a companion. By the 3rd week, Emily could walk across the workshop floor, her legs trembling but steady. Olivia stood near the door, tears running freely down her cheeks. For so long, she had imagined this moment in her dreams, always waking up before it came true. Now it was real. She clapped a hand over her mouth as Emily turned toward her and said softly, "Mum, I can do it." Olivia dropped to her knees as Emily took the last step into her arms. She cried so hard that even Ethan had to turn away, pretending to look for a tool he didn't need. The garage filled with sounds of relief, joy, and disbelief. Emily hugged her mother and whispered, "I'm not scared anymore." Those words carried more weight than any medical report. They weren't just about walking, they were about living without fear, about reclaiming the part of her life that had been taken away. For Ethan, it was the sound of his sister's voice echoing back through time, forgiving him for not being able to save her. News stations broadcast the story nationwide. The miracle mechanic of Houston became a headline everywhere. People from across the country reached out to parents of disabled children, veterans, hospitals, and engineers who wanted to learn his methods. Ethan didn't answer interviews or attend talk shows. He stayed in his garage, still working, still quiet. He didn't crave recognition. For him, the miracle wasn't Emily's fame. It was her laughter echoing through the workshop as she practiced walking. That was the only reward he needed. Olivia, however, couldn't stay silent. She used her influence not to promote her company, but to promote Ethan's vision. She announced the creation of the Ethan Miles Foundation, dedicated to making affordable mobility devices for children and adults with disabilities. Every design Ethan built would be shared openly, free from patents. Engineers, students, and inventors from around the world began contributing to the cause. Olivia funded it completely, saying it was the least she could do for the man who gave her daughter back her future. Ethan attended the launch only because Emily asked him to. He stood quietly in the background, while cameras flashed around Olivia as she spoke. When the reporters called for him to come forward, Emily tugged his sleeve and whispered, "Please." He smiled softly and joined her. On stage, Ethan said only a few words. "I'm not a miracle worker. I just fixed what was broken, and sometimes that includes people." His voice was steady, his eyes calm. The audience went silent, many wiping away tears. Olivia looked at him with gratitude beyond words, realizing that he had changed not just Emily's life, but hers as well. He had reminded her of something she'd forgotten in her climb to the top, that the greatest power is not wealth or technology, but kindness guided by purpose. Months later, the foundation spread to multiple states. Hundreds of children who had never walked before began taking their first steps using designs inspired by Ethan's invention. Emily visited some of them, telling them to never give up. She carried herself with quiet confidence now, her spirit stronger than her body had ever been. She always credited Ethan, though he refused to take the spotlight. He remained in his garage, still fixing cars, still helping whoever came through his door. One evening, Emily and Olivia visited him. Again, the sky glowed orange as the sun set behind the skyline. Emily walked to him without her chair, her steps steady, her smile bright. She handed him a framed photograph of the day she first walked into her mother's arms. "For you," she said. Softly, Ethan took it, his throat tightening. He placed it on the shelf beside an old picture of his sister. For the first time in years he felt peace. He had kept his promise to himself, to his sister, and now to a world that believed again in impossible things.